turn to the book of Acts 27. Well, the book of Acts, chapter 27, starting in verse 1. Sorry, the historian in me doesn't like this. The set sail for Italy. It would not have been called that for several centuries to come. Anyways, when the time came, we set sail for Italy. Paul and several other prisoners were placed in the custody of a Roman officer named Julius, a captain of the imperial regiment. Lord, I thank you for your word this day, for your grace, your love, and everything you do for us. I pray you would bless this sermon and have it be exactly what you want it to be. In your name, amen. Can I get the next slide? I don't remember where I went from there. All right, thank you. Here we have the finale to the trilogy of sorts I've preached on Paul, of him getting thrown in jail, of his defense while in jail, and now finally his release to go to Rome and be seen before Caesar. It's perhaps not the most straightforward message for a Thanksgiving morning. Well, not really Thanksgiving, of course, but for a Thanksgiving-themed sermon, which I hopefully will be able to do, though I can feel me lose the ability to speak the longer I do it. But hey, I'll do my best. Verse 3, the next day when we docked at Sidon, Julius was very kind to Paul and let him go ashore to visit with friends so they could provide for his needs. Paul and the other early first century church members are perhaps the best bearers for a Thanksgiving message, actually, because their consistent joy, well, we would see as sheer dumb luck, but their consistent providence that they are faced with and how they manage to hold on to hope in the darkest of times is incredibly inspiring. It fits right with that Thanksgiving theme. Paul is, this is going to be hard. Paul is famously one of two people who are actively singing praise and worship songs while being beaten in jail. Which is obviously something hard for us to imagine. When we have bad days, when we get flat tires, it's hard for us to remember to be joyful and celebratory. But part of that, I think, is, of course, the traditional misunderstanding of what joy really is. It's one of those things where we all know that we don't use it correctly, but we keep not using it correctly because it's so easy to fall into. Joy is, of course, right there. It looks quite cold. You're more than welcome to borrow my jacket if you need. Joy is not simply happiness. Joy is not a pleasant feeling. It is not immediate gratification. It is not the sense of pleasure you get when you taste some chocolate or kiss a girl or get a raise at your job. That's not joy. Don't give me that look. I can say kiss a girl if I want to. Joy is much deeper than that. It is more of a state of being, I would say, than an emotion. It is the ability to face hard times, troubles, and trials, and get through them and keep going. In a weird roundabout way, when you wake up in the morning and you make the conscious decision to get out of bed, to pull your boots on and keep going, in a way, that is joy. It's a lot like how bravery and fearlessness are often confused as the same thing. That's not true. As we all know, being brave does not mean you're not afraid. It's being afraid and doing the right thing anyways. And yet we continue to use the term bravery interchangeably with not being afraid. And in much the same way, we will continue, presumably, to use the term joy to describe euphoria and great feelings of happiness, when in reality, they are more often than not contradictory. I almost said privilege, but frankly, a lot closer to misfortune recently of listening to an extended lecture by a philosopher in the same veins as Nietzsche. No one famous, no one anybody would recognize by name, but someone who bought into the, I guess you'd say, Renaissance, secular humanist point of view. And it ultimately amounted to an extended tirade against all religions, presumably ours in particular, because he's American, so we're the ones he has to put up with most of the time. And our general outlook of denying oneself, of not living first and foremost for self-gratification. Religion, in his mind, is inherently insidious and evil because it promotes self-harm. Because it says that you should suffer in order that your neighbor doesn't. Which, hey, great philosophy, great way of looking at the world. As long as, you know, your neighbor doesn't believe that. Because then suddenly, I'm thinking you're going to change your mind real darn quick and decide that it's actually in his best interest to make sure you don't suffer. That's the problem. First and foremost, with any, I would quite simply say, barbaric, anti-religious worldview, is that as long as you believe that a human being's first and only goal is to take care of themselves, that's fine. When your neighbor starts believing it, then you have the problem. I will freely admit and even, I think, celebrate the fact that very often a Christian is called to put someone else's happiness before their own. I have literally been called by telephone to give up a day off to drive to the clear other side of Carson to help someone out. I can't claim to being mature enough in my Christian walk to particularly enjoy having to do that. But I'm glad I did. I'm fairly certain I got scammed when I did it, but I'm still glad I did. I'm glad I was given the opportunity to help my fellow man. And yeah, sacrificed my own time and my own means in order to help someone else. Because I certainly could have ignored it and had the instant gratification of staying home and not doing anything about it. But the feeling I got from helping others, for not being, frankly, a selfish git, and abandoning the rest of the human race to their own means, I find significantly more rewarding. But hey, maybe that's just me. Oh no, wait, Christians have been doing it for the last 2,000 years, and there's a reason they've been the dominant social and cultural force on planet Earth for the last 2,000 years. Because it works. It's one of those irritating things for people who supposedly care so much about science and factual data and doing things solely on a realistic basis, and then completely ignore the last 2 millennia of history as if it didn't happen and wasn't a clear pattern for people to follow. Just statistically speaking, the Christian lifestyle is the most rewarding and fulfilling. Follow the science, as they say. Anyways, back to the actual lesson, as we see Paul act out this Christian lifestyle. Verse 4, putting out to sea from there, we encountered strong headwinds that made it difficult to keep the ship on course. So we sailed north of Cyprus, between the island and the mainland. Then I believe, if we go down to verse, let's go, let's just do verse 9. Oh, yeah, see, I agree with my past self. That means it must be correct. We had lost a lot of time. The weather was becoming dangerous for sea travel because it was so late in the fall, and Paul spoke to the ship's officers about it. Men, he said, I believe there is trouble ahead if we go on. Shipwreck, loss of cargo, and danger to our lives as well. But the officers in charge of the prisoners listened more to the ship's captain and the owner than to Paul. And since Fair Havens was an exposed harbor, a poor place to spend the winter, most of the crew wanted to go on to Phoenix, not Arizona, for the record, farther up the coast of Crete, and spend the winter there. This is amusing to me as a student of this particular era of history, as this is, of course, a Roman ship with a Roman crew. Rome was not a great naval power that was always Greece's or Carthage's main talent. Rome was really good at fighting you on land, but their seamanship leaves much to be desired. This might be the single most historically realistic thing in the entire Bible, a Roman ship completely ignoring the bad weather and trying to cross the Mediterranean. Rome literally lost on 4 or 5 separate occasions fleets of hundreds of ships because they refused to pay attention to the weather and sailed out in the middle of a hurricane to fight the Carthaginians, who were not there because there was a storm going on. Just a merely amusing incident to me that I love that even in the biblical narrative, yeah, Romans apparently don't get that you shouldn't sail in hurricanes. Anyways, verse 20. The terrible storm raged for many days, blotting out the sun and the stars, until at last all hope was gone. Jeez. It says Phoenix, but I'm thinking this is a lot closer to Buffalo. Verse 33. Just as day was dawning, Paul urged everyone to eat. You have been so worried that you haven't touched food for 2 weeks, he said. Please, eat something now for your own good, for not a hair of your heads will perish. This is awesome, and I think this is an underrated element of this story, and frankly, an underrated element to our particular holiday of Thanksgiving. Because as I'm fairly certain we all know, the ship goes on to be shipwrecked, but interestingly, there is no casualties. Everyone makes it out of this alive. Paul has spoken to God and has prayed, and despite the Romans blatantly ignoring him and sailing off to their own doom against his advice, and despite the fact that he is literally a prisoner being sent to appear before Nero, which doesn't end well most of the time, Paul still stuck his own neck out on the line, as it were, and has specifically prayed for not only himself, but everyone on this ship. I better hurry up here. And this is remarkable if you are familiar with the makeup of a ship of this era. Because we do mention sailors here several times. You know who sailors are? Not Roman. If they're actual paid sailors to run the ship, that makes them Greek or Carthage, because again, that's who was good at running ships. If it's referring to the people who did the actual manual labor, those are slaves from all over the empire, forcibly taken and put to heavy labor aboard this vessel. We know Paul is not the only prisoner aboard, and presumably there is more than just Christians aboard this ship, because would just be people who have messed up badly enough to be being taken from the Middle East to see the Caesar. It's like, this is going to be a rogues gallery of rebels, political dissidents, rule breakers, and just people like Paul. This is a fascinating, almost human zoo, a tapestry of people, personalities, ethnicities, differences. There is a reason that tons, the ability to speak foreign languages, is so focused upon in the New Testament, because there is a huge language barrier here. This isn't modern day where everyone speaks English in the first place and where everyone has Google Translate, if nothing else. This is Rome. This is the crossroads of the world. This is 100 different cultures, 100 different languages. The ability to communicate properly, much less get along, much less work together to survive a boat crash, is so unique. And it's so interesting to me that it's Paul at the forefront of it with his praying. And really, that's what we can see and should see, I think, Thanksgiving as. I don't think it was official. I don't think Abraham Lincoln was responsible for making Thanksgiving an official holiday, but he's certainly the one who popularized the idea. He is the reason we celebrate. And it was because Americans were shooting each other, and he thought we should all get together and have something to be thankful for. I'm inclined to agree. we get the we get that holiday from for a country that is so divided, they're literally killing each other, and the president wants something to bring people together. We rewind way before then, the original Thanksgiving, the image of the Native American and the Pilgrims eating together. And of course, we can't do that now. That's taboo. That's politically correct. Because of course, within a century, those two groups will go to war, and the Pilgrims will wipe out the natives. So of course, we can't have a holiday celebrating the two of them getting together peacefully. That is the single dumbest thing that I have ever heard. And I mentioned Nietzsche earlier. The idea that a holiday is lessened because the two groups who celebrated it don't normally get along. Really? Is Christmas not 100 times better because we have the story of the Christmas truce from World War I? Fairly certain that British people and German soldiers did not get along in 1914 and would go on to shoot each other. The holiday is more important. That's the entire idea, that it is these two groups that are so fundamentally different that they will engage in bloodthirsty massacres for the next 200 years, who for this one day put that aside and got together to celebrate something. There's a story, another story from the World Wars, the second one, where a Luftwaffe pilot spots an Allied bomber heavily damaged, and not only spares it, but helps escort it back into friendly skies. That story isn't any less valuable because that's not the norm. That's why we remember that story, because that doesn't normally happen. Because people who are different don't normally get along. It is human nature to dislike what is different from yours, to be hostile towards outsiders, especially in a stressful situation like a shipwreck. This is Roman soldiers, hardened, trained, disciplined, some of the best living killing machines in history, getting together with this hippy-dippy Christian to save slaves and make sure everyone gets out all right. This is weird. This is unusual. This is very Thanksgiving-esque. This is people getting together, breaking food in the middle of a storm that could kill them all, to celebrate the fact that they're not going to die because God said He'd spare them. And I think the story actually gets even better when it slowly winds up in the next chapter, actually. Acts 28. Once we were safe on the shore, we learned that we were on the island of Malta. The people of the island were very kind to us. It was cold and rainy, so they built a fire on the shore to welcome us. I don't have any great theological points to make for that. That's just nice. I like that. That's all I have to say there. That these shipwrecked survivors. See, this one little story would make a great movie if you would indulge me that. This idea of the ship sailing out, trying to survive the storm. It goes down. The crazy guy says we'll survive. We don't need the lifeboats. For some reason, they listen and cut the lifeboats free. They all stick together at the ninth hour. They break bread. Paul specifically describes, or tells them to, I should say, that the strong swimmers will go first and leave the wreckage for the weaker swimmers to grab onto. The entire crew of almost 300 survives. They make it, and they are greeted friendly by the locals. Remember, these are Roman soldiers and or slaves. So the fact that the locals greet them with open arms, build fires, help them warm up. This is just a great story, and I think it's a great story for Thanksgiving, to show these people from across the globe, well, not quite the globe obviously, but across the Roman Empire, surviving thanks to God, having food together, being taken in by the locals, and just in general, a great story of survival. It's like Titanic if it had a happy ending. So this morning, again, I'm very grateful for you all, and I'm very thankful for the good food to look forward to. If we have anything else we need to pray about or discuss before we dismiss, as my laryngitis slowly gets the better of me. But all right, then. If Joshua would pray us out here.
Did you decide for sure about Wednesday night?
I did it. I won't be here. That's all I know for sure.
I just needed to know whether
It comes down to whether or not you want to, sir.
Yeah, if you want to lead it, we'll be here.
okay, might as well be here then.
All right then. If all hearts and minds clear, then let's go fill the stomachs. Yeah, if you'd pray us out of here, Josh.
And bless us here, get us here safely next time.
Amen.
It's not